There are so many things we don't know about each other. There are so many things we don't even know about ourselves. These are two key thoughts I had while doing some learning today about search engine optimization and making the public comment blog more, and my video diary more easier to access on the web, on the internet, but also it turned into something that was deeply required some deep introspection, because this is very interesting. So if you're no longer watching this because you're not interested in search engine optimization, hold on just a second, because this actually has to do with something much more personal and interesting, I would argue. Because the broader question to be asked when you're doing something like, really in any, I think, social situation in which you're really thinking about how you're navigating through life in a social way. Certainly, of course, though, this applies when we're thinking about putting together like a website or a business or these kinds of things. Though what I discovered was, it's one thing to ask yourself how you would imagine stumbling across your website, your blog, right? It's another thing to ask, how might you, or rather, how might others, in searching for what they're searching for, logically be expected to come across your website or what have you. And one of the questions that's asked is, I don't remember where I wrote it down, but the question to be asked is, how am I perceived? That was let my notebook be my guide. That's my principle for today's diary entries. Instead of typing it out, I just jotted things down in my notebook while I was walking. I was faced with the question, though, how am I perceived by you, by others? How are we as individuals perceived by others? How are we perceived by ourselves? And to what degree are we accurate or inaccurate as well? So, goodness, the first thing that came to my mind when I started asking, how might you perceive me? I had this fear. Oh my God, I don't want to start fixating too much on myself. On the other hand, we have to have a degree of self-interest in the loose sense of the term. I mean, I'm not an egoist, so I don't want to be misconstrued for that. What I mean is, you obviously can't survive if you don't take care of yourself. You obviously can't thrive if you don't take care of yourself. You obviously are limited in how you can be of help to others if you're not first a good help to yourself. This is why I call my ethical principle pure compassion, because compassion as a abstract concept would have to reasonably apply both to you and others. You've got to find that balance, right? But the question remains, am I thinking too much about myself? Am I not thinking enough about myself? These are questions that I was contemplating today as I was thinking about how it is that the public comment, website, blog, vlog, video diary, etc. would all be perhaps perceived by you on social media or in conversation, etc. So there I am then thinking, yeah, how is it that I am perceived? And this troubled me because, well, first of all, I suppose there's always this question of, I think I've talked about this before, people might have harsh or destructive or convoluted notions of you. First of all. Secondly, we all have limited exposure to one another, right? That goes into what I was saying before. We don't really all know each other that well. I mean, that comes back to my whole purpose here of facilitating conversation. That's probably my greatest passion, is just facilitating conversation and having, therefore meaningfully thought out stuff to do that. To have thought things out and therefore have something to say to try to move public discourse further. But how is it that we do get exposed to each other, and what are the top aspects of each other that get tagged into our minds? There's this really great passage. Let's see if I can find it. I know I may have shared this with you before in the past. I don't know where this book is lingering. Darn, right? When you want to have access to something and you can't find what it was you wanted to have access to. Sometimes we just have too many books. It feels like. Please forgive me for leaving you waiting. This is an interesting book, if you've ever heard of it. Man Without Qualities. There is a passage in here. I wonder if I'd be able to find it briefly. It was just one of the most interesting things. Although, I realized it wasn't this book, it was actually Proust. And where is that? I told you, sometimes I was reading something that talks positively about having a lot of books laying around, but on the other hand, it does leave you in a scramble. Especially when you're free thinking, because you can't always plan on what book it is you're going to land on. But there is this beautiful passage by Proust about this scenario where we are, in fact, so limited in how we are exposed to each other. It's going to, of course, drive me crazy now that I can't find it. And it's going to drive you crazy that I'm here fixating on this. But it's important. I don't want to leave you waiting too much longer, so I won't. But if I can find it in a quick sort of flash here. I found it. You've got to be optimistic in life. Try and try again. Okay. It was this amazing passage. Of course, the easy thing to do would be able to just pause the video, but I'm going for a real kind of raw thing here. That's my goal. And besides, I've not read so much of Proust that I've only read up to page 53, so in like a year of having this book, so cheers. But this is one of those passages that I've marked quite well and highlighted. I might have even put a picture of it on Facebook once. But I want to share this with you because it's so interesting. Even in the most insignificant details of our daily life, none of us can be said to constitute a material whole, which is identical for everyone, and need only be turned up like a page in an account book or the record of a will. Our social personality is created by the thoughts of other people. Even the simple act which we describe as seeing someone we know is, to some extent, an intellectual process. We pack the physical outline of the creature we see with all the ideas we have already formed about him. He should have said or her, but I guess those were different times. And in the complete picture of him, which we compose in our minds, those ideas have certainly the principal place. In the end, they come to fill out so completely the curve of his cheeks, to follow so exactly the line of his nose, they blend so harmoniously in the sound of his voice, that these seem to be no more than a transparent envelope, so that each time we see the face or hear the voice, it is our own ideas of him, which we recognize to and to which we listen. This seems to imply a little bit more about the physical aspects of a person, but what stood out here for me, where the hell was my bookmark? Oh, here. Sorry about that. What stood out here to me is just this idea that, first of all, you only see these little aspects of somebody. And where do you even see these aspects? It depends on how you meet someone, the context in which you meet someone. Do you meet someone in person or on social media? Do you know someone in a workplace setting? And does workplace politics limit the degree to which you know someone versus, meeting someone at the park or at the bar or a neighbor or on vacation, etc., right? There's all these different ways that we find ourselves interacting with one another.